Shalom, Akim, Shalom, Shalom, giving all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Makakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders, great millstone, for teaching us his truth, and salutations to the sincere Akim and Aquathim. And listen, may the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Raquai. I'm back here with another quick and Lord's will, as always, an edifying lesson. And for today's lesson, I wanted to, just do a short continuation of, of the essentially the Jubilee custom. After a certain amount of years pass by, they're essentially on the 50th year. There would basically be a social, economic reset. So for example, when Israelites went through certain hardships, and they had to whatever mortgage their fields and so on and so forth. And in the last lesson, I brought out an example of that happening in the time of Nehemiah, where our people had to basically sell off portions of their field in order to essentially make ends meet during that time. That was a very important aspect of why the Jubilee is so important, because that being said, it was a divine, I should say, mechanism that was put forth by Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai to be able to kind of reset things and make sure those fields and those possessions remained within the family, remained within that tribe, remained within that household. Because I don't think our people understand that how wonderful the Lord's ways are. That's number one. And number two, they don't understand that ultimately you're in captivity, and the possessions that you have are not they're tainted. They're not really yours. And then you're also as the scriptures say, you're subject to payments. I'll start off with that one, actually, and then I'll kind of just floor around with this topic. I don't want to make the lesson too long, but this is why these customs are so important, is to also highlight and understand that these customs that that we keep today are not actually bringing forth life. At least the Lord had mechanisms put in place where our substance would stay within our kin, and that's something I want to get into today. This is Baruch chapter 3, verse 8, and it says, "Behold, yet we are yet this day in our captivity, where thou hast scattered us for a reproach and a curse, and to be subject to payments, according to all the iniquities of our fathers, which departed from the Lord Yahweh, our power." Right? So this is one of the conditions of the battle that we're suffering from right now, being in captivity and being subject to these different bills and payments. Because even if you had certain, like, some land and so on and so forth, the land, these transactions, it still has to go through the government's always involved. And the crazy thing is, even where you tribes are located today, it has to be done the same way, right? But pursuant to different prophecies that Esau would have the fatness of the earth, where you different tribes are located today, you don't actually own full, you don't have full rights to your land. There are stipulations. You're either being oppressed by the ruling class, right? You either have Esau or Moab, within your countries, buying up fields. That's a very common thing. Speaking from experience that I've seen in the Caribbean, so you don't actually, as the scriptures say, pursuant to the curses, you have to go to your enemies for the want of all things, and these people are your enemies, right? So, I wanted to just touch on a little bit more portion of the Jubilee, which basically is like a socio-economic reset, and putting things back in place, in the event our people, suffered some, they fell on hard times, and for whatever reasons, they had to use the valuables, the intrinsic valuable things that they had to basically, make it to the end, right? When I say that, I mean, to make ends meet, so to speak, right? Because, certain things happen, whether it's famine or, right? So um, I wanted to just, this is pretty much, um, I just wanted to read this, just a short, basically a synopsis that I got off Grok in regards to the what's it called, the Kinsman Redeemer, right? So it says here, in Israel the land belonged ultimately to the Most High, right? And it says, unto each family tribe received an inheritance portion that was to stay within the family line forever, right? So that's very, very important. It had to stay within the family line forever, you know. And one of the things is, when you think about, our people today, because we're destroyed for lack of knowledge, like we took on, a lot of us, Israelite men, we married the different, heathens, and then, for whatever reason, that those that land wasn't supposed to go unto them. And that's one of the things that's happened as well to our people, departing from the ways of the Lord, right? So it says here, as a matter of fact, just as a refresher, since it said that, okay, let me just hit Joshua real quick. I think it was, is it 24? Let me see, one second. No, maybe it's 23. Okay, Joshua 23, verse 4, and it says, behold, I have divided unto you by lot these nations that remain to be an inheritance for your tribes from Jordan, with all the nations I have cut off, even unto the great sea, westward. And the Lord, your power, Yahweh, he shall expel them before you and drive them out of your sight, and ye shall possess their land, as the Lord your power hath promised unto you. Right. So that was the land that, during the time of Joshua, we went in, and then the different tribes received a different portion of the land. They received that physical portion. Right. So I just wanted to read that, real quick. And so this is pretty much the kinsman redeemer. So it says, if a family member fell into debt and had to sell off part of the ancestral land, the sale was more likely like a lease during the year of the Jubilee every 50 years, when it would automatically return to the original family. Before that, so you have something called the nearest relative, often known as the kinsman redeemer or a redeemer. You know what I'm saying? It says had both the right and the duty to redeem, buy back the land. I'm sorry. So in the event, you had these certain circumstances that fell upon you, you had a near kin male, like a relative of, of your family or your clan, that would essentially take that, they would buy that land back. They were able to redeem it for you. You know what I'm saying? So what happens is, it's a mechanism that's put forth in place by the Hawabah Shai to make sure that land, is not occupied by, for example, like heathens, right? You know what I'm saying? That stays within the family, right? It says this kept this kept it from permanently leaving the family or clan. It says it was typically the closest male blood relative who was able to pay the redemption price. The role could also extend to other family duties, like marrying a widow to preserve the family line, as found in the book of Ruth, right? So, let me read that real quick in Leviticus, and I just want to get an example of that, where the prophet Jeremiah actually fulfills this, so you see the importance of these different customs, right? So let me get what this is speaking of, Leviticus 25. And it's quite a long chapter. I'm kind of just hitting different snippets of it and showing the importance of it, right? So this is let me see. Okay, so this is Leviticus chapter 25. I'll start at verse 23 just to hit the point, because the land ultimately belongs to Yahweh Bashim Shai, of course, right? And we were merely to be stewards of that land to exemplify, his righteousness, his ways, his laws, statutes, and commandments, because the other nations are supposed to learn and understand, this is a great nation and a wise and understanding people, and it's supposed to actually, administer the importance of that law, right? That's why the Lord, called us to be a nation of kings and priests. And part of the role of a priest is to be able to discern between the holy and the profane. So here it says, Leviticus chapter 25, I'll start at verse 23, and it says, "And the land should not be sold forever, for the land is mine, for ye are strangers and sojourners with me. And it says, "And the land of your possession ye shall grant a redemption of the land, if thy brother be waxen poor, and he hath sold away some of his possession for any, and if any kin come to redeem it, then he shall redeem that which his brother has sold," right? So if you had a near kinsman who was able to, you fall on hard times, for example, okay, you realize, okay, I have to take this portion of my inheritance and I have to sell it off to be able to make ends meet. I have to mortgage it for whatever reason, for whatever reason that may be, you had a close kins male relative to be able to do so, that was very beneficial to you, because that person can, essentially redeem it or buy it or hold on to it, but in the event, like for example, if you didn't have that for whatever reason, right, you fell on hard times anyways, that way the Jubilee would still be beneficial for you, because when that year comes, all that ancestral land gets returned back to the family, right? So here it says, continuing on, "If the man have none to redeem it, and himself be able to redeem it, then let him count the years of the sale, and restore the overplus unto the man to whom he sold it, that he may return unto his possession. If he be not able to restore it to him, then that which is sold shall remain out of him that is bought until the year," that's exactly what I was just referring to, "until the year of the Jubilee. And the Jubilee it shall go out, that he shall return to his possession," right? So all those possessions that you mortgaged off, for whatever reason, because it's not like Jake didn't go through hard times back then, right? The point is, though, these mechanisms, and it's really to glorify the importance of why the laws are strongly needed upon the planet Earth, right? And one of the reasons I want to start at verse 23 primarily is because we have a wicked ruler who doesn't actually implement this mindset, because they are basically coveting fields, right? And they are not exemplifying the law. Let me get this in Sirach, because that's one of the things that they do. They covet and try and acquire all this different substance, but they don't actually do anything beneficial with it. They don't actually administer any examples of righteousness with it. The only time the Bible actually comes up is only in times of war, when they want to covet more stuff, when they want to covet more land and more resources. So let me go to Ecclesiasticus. Let me get this here. This is just a good sharp contrast to show the difference between, a good leader, and then understanding that the vibration that we're under is under a vibration of a wicked ruler, right? As scriptures say that an unwise king destroyeth his people, because our people still take on the mindset of the king that rules over them, right? So this is Sirach chapter 20 verse 30, and it says, "Wisdom that is hid and treasure that is hoarded up, what profit is in them both?" Right? So there is no profit, and it's posing it as a question. there is no profit for a bunch of treasure to be hoarded up, right? I know we're just really talking about lands here. We're not even talking about mineral resources. We're not talking about livestock. We're not talking about precious metals, gold, silver, brass, things that can actually, I remember in Canada, there was a year when I remember, being in my teens, and I remember how there was a time when we used to have the penny, and the penny's made of copper, right? And copper has its benefits, for the blood, so on and so forth, right? So there was a period in time where it used to be, the penny was, was often used, and now you don't have that anymore, and it's very funny. When you go back into the Caesars in Rome, for example, Nero, he was one of the first Caesars to debase the currency. So basically to mix the silver, or they called it at that time, they called it the denarius. They mixed it with a lot of cheaper and inferior metals. So it started to become a lot cheaper, and some more, the value began to what's the word I'm looking for? It began to decrease, because you're mixing the content of the silver with cheaper inferior metals, right? So that at that point, you're having, as the years go by, you're having less silver and probably more, I don't know, like copper or whatever, you know what I'm saying? So it's not as valuable as it used to be, right? So that's the mindset of Esau, really, is he doesn't actually acknowledge that the land actually belongs to Yahweh Ashmel Shai, right? So because he has a God complex, he has a mindset, they actually believe they don't need the Most High. That's how pride and arrogant, that they are, right? And that pride, is going to cost them, right? So let me get another one actually in Isaiah, then I'll get the account. The account in, let's see, one second. This is Isaiah chapter, one second. All right, Salakim. Okay, Isaiah 24 verse 5, and it says, "And the earth is also defiled by the inhabitants thereof, because they have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinance, and broken the everlasting covenant." So this is, what we're seeing right now is a bunch of transgressions of the laws. The laws that are actually supposed to be put forth in place to actually maintain the earth's welfare, right? So, okay, let me go to the book of Jeremiah. One second. This is something I wanted to get, where Jeremiah fulfills this role. Let me get this here. Okay, this is Jeremiah chapter 32, verse 6, and it says, "And Jeremiah said, The word of the Lord Yahweh came unto me, saying, Behold, Hanamiel the son of Shallum, thine uncle, shall come unto thee, saying, Buy thee my field that is in Anathoth, for the right of the redemption is in thine to buy it. So Hanamiel, mine uncle's son," so basically his cousin, right, "came to me in the court of the prison." So at this point, Jeremiah is in prison, right? And it says, "According to the word of the Lord Yahweh, and said unto me, Buy my field, I pray thee. This is in Anathoth, which is in the country of Benjamin," right? So, you understand that, okay, this is the field, this is my own kinsman, right? We belong to this tribe, right? So now he's going to Jeremiah to be able to fulfill that role of a redeemer, right? So continuing on here, it says, "For the right of inheritance is thine, and the right and the redemption is thine to buy it for thyself. Then I knew that this was the word of the Lord Yahweh. And I bought the field of Hanamiel, my uncle's son, that was in Anathoth, and weighed him the money, even 17 shekels of silver. And I subscribed the evidence and sealed it, and took 2 witnesses and weighed him the money in the balances. And so I took the evidence of the purchase, both of which was sealed according to the law and to the custom that was that which was open, and I gave the evidence of the purchase unto Baruch the son of Neriah, the son of Messiah, in the sight of Hanamiel, my uncle's son, in the presence of witnesses, and subscribed the book of the purchase before all the Jews that sat in the court of the prison, right? So this is basically the transaction, of Jeremiah conducting himself as that kinsman redeemer to buy that field, right, and perform that transaction. And notice there within this transaction, there's no tax, there's no banks that's actually involved here. It's just this is the original way. This is the ancient custom, that's part of our culture, right? So this Jeremiah fulfilling this role, then that field, that inheritance, stays within the family. It doesn't, get passed on, to, another tribe, or it doesn't get passed on to another, or even to a heathen nation, right? So it just made sure that things were kept within, our people's nationhood, right? Within our bloodline, right? So, and these things are very, very important, right? So when you see, what's going on, where you have Esau, he's basically taking and buying up all these different farmlands. When you have Killgates buying up different farmlands, it realized it should, beg questions like, okay, I don't, we don't have our own inheritance. And even what they do with that, what do you call it? What they do with that inheritance, I shouldn't say inheritance, but rather what they do with their resources, they just use it to push forth wickedness. They don't actually push forth a vibration of righteousness, because as the scriptures say, when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn, and that's exactly what's happening right now. The people are mourning, right? And to going through these customs, our people should be mourning, because now your true inheritance, I should say, understanding your heritage, now you're starting to realize that there is a calling out of the people that are within the land, right? Because that is actually your true inheritance, you Israelites, you so-called blacks, Hispanics, Native Americans, and speckled birds, that still go back to the seed line of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. A lot of these other nations are calling out those people in the land, right? And the scriptures say that, thou shalt be greatly despised, because they're realizing that those people in the land are not the true people, right? And the scriptures also say that Jerusalem should be trodden down by the Gentiles. So, this should, raise a flag in our people's ears to realize like, there's something, there's something's up, right? So, I just wanted to, touch on that real quick, because, inheritance is so important, right? And that's what we're waiting for, right? We're waiting for, new heavens and a new earth, that dwells, in righteousness, so to speak. I'll end off with that one. This is 2 Peter chapter 3 verse 13, and it says, nevertheless, according to his promises, we look for new heavens and a new earth, wherein that dwelleth righteousness, right? So, this is not a place we can rest. This is not actual, living. We don't live to our full potential. Even the earth doesn't even, yield to its full potential. What I'm saying, because you have wicked people in rulership, right? So, that's pretty much the point. Lord's will, this lesson was quick and edifying. I'd just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Basham El Shai. Until next time, I say Shalom.